Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTVC. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue. You'll see it on bumper stickers as you drive around Austin. The words, "If you want peace, practice justice." Another way you could express that truth is that if you want good morale, practice good morals. Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and your host for today's program. And today we come to a subject which is particularly fitting for a religious public affairs program, taking a reading on the spirit and integrity of our city and their inseparable relationship. These are indeed two branches arising from the same root. For without attention to the justice issues, then the morale of any given community is reduced to boosterism. But with the ethical fiber strong, then enthusiasm for the common life is genuine. Joining us in our discussion of this topic are two contributors both to the larger and to the religious communities of the capital city. Rose Lancaster is currently on the staff of the Presbyterian Children's Home and Service Agency. She was previously a founder and director of Extendicare and has lived in Austin for a number of years. Father Peter Logsdon is rector of St. Mary's Cathedral and a new arrival in Austin. We welcome you both.
Thank you.
And as someone who has just come to the city within the last few weeks, Father Logsdon, we'd be happy to give you an official welcome here.
Thank you very much.
And have you tell us about where you've come from and what brings you to Austin.
Yes, I have been assigned to St. Mary's Catholic Cathedral here in Austin just recently in June. And before that, I have been working for our Holy Cross Fathers Catholic religious community. We started at Notre Dame in Indiana, and many of our members work here in Central Texas. So I was working for the order here in Central Texas, and now am assigned to St. Mary's Cathedral.
But you had indicated to us prior to the show that you were also living in Austin as far back as sometime in the 70s, is that right?
That's correct. In 1974, I came as pastor of St. Ignatius Church in South Austin and was there until 1980 when I was elected to my post for the order.
All right, so 6 years in the 70s and something like, what, 3 months at the end of the 80s.
That's right.
And to compare what it was like then with what it is now in terms of this whole issue of the morale of the city, we'd like to come back to that.
Okay.
Rose, I'd like, however, for you to tell us and our viewers how long you've been here in Austin.
We first came to Austin in '55, which was at the height of integration issue and also McCarthyism. So it was, I can reflect back on the response to this community to those two very important issues. And I did that mostly through the League of Women Voters, was involved with them and was their president in the early 60s. I also was on the founding committee of the United Urban Council and its organization after that, the Metro Ministries of Austin, and helped organize the Austin Area Human Services Association, which brought together directors of all the human services, or many of the human services in the community.
Is that still in operation?
Yes, it's still a vital place for our directors to come together to share and support one another.
Okay. And then you were founder and director of Extendicare?
Well, I was executive director of Extendicare when it started in a small church, and then moved into the school system, and then was spread across the community. It was a very innovative thing at the time.
All right. And we're going to come back to that because I think that's kind of a bellwether of the kind of community Austin is in regard to caring for human needs and being somewhat innovative about that. I would like, however, to just have you share with us, Father Logsdon, about your arrival in Austin in 1989. Think about what it's like at the current moment as compared with what it was back in 1974. similarities and differences, the spirit of the city?
When I came in 1974, I felt there was a great amount of enthusiasm and excitement in Austin. It was still relatively small. It seemed to be about half the size it is now. And this is a beautiful city, as we all know, with its beautiful river and the hill country, and everything about it is just a wonderful place to live. And in those days, even only 15 years ago, it was a place where there was a good feeling, a feeling I felt of kind of a place to raise your family, like the #1 American city. And I felt that all through the 70s, there was that sense of euphoria that everybody can come and enjoy the wonderful life in Austin.
An upbeat spirit at that time.
Very upbeat, I felt.
Okay, and then in the summer of 1989, you arrive.
Right.
Do you find that same spirit?
Well, it's still a wonderful, beautiful place. My present location is in the center of the city. And I guess even though I knew about some of the problems of the poor and the homeless and felt all through my priestly life a concern for the poor, I see it on a daily basis now. I see the people come to the door that don't have food or clothing or shelter, and they're of all kinds, from all walks of life. And they're really, I think, feel, as we say, down on their luck. And I think it's the opportunity and challenge for us at the cathedral and among the downtown churches to respond to that
Yes.
concern.
And as another downtown pastor, I identify with that on a daily basis with you. And one of the things that I've observed is that I think that for a city, whether it's Austin or any other, to have so much on the surface, that kind of human need, is demoralizing. I think it's demoralizing for the country that suddenly we've always had people who, as you say, have been down on their luck, but there's this awakening to the fact that now this is not just taking on folks who have got, say, addiction problems or like on Skid Row kind of thing, but these are people, these are families. Right. These are people who have at one time been in the middle class, and because of the economic dislocations are now on the streets. And I think that has created, in my experience as a pastor, as I'm sure yours, that this has a dampening effect on the enthusiasm people can feel about their community. And not unique to Austin, but certainly has a very special expression here. And I think that I keep saying we're going to come back to this, so I don't want to forget that. But I also want to balance it with your experience going back in the 1950s, Rose. You didn't find the homeless situation here then like you do now, I suspect. But you found needs then.
Yes, as I said, the integration and McCarthyism and all that was in the air at that time and right before the 60s, and a lot of movement into expression of concern about social issues. But I always have felt that Austin, even in that time, responded in a positive and innovative way. I feel like Austin has always been very tolerable of diversity, different lifestyles. I remember two businessmen, I'll mention them by names because I think I should, Chester Snyder of Snyder Chenards and Harry Aiken of the Nighthawk came forth and integrated before it was acceptable. But I think there was a climate in this community, although I know they had some personal harassment, to support that. So I think where leaders have come forth and done something that's on the front line, the firing line, that there's always been community support. We've never done enough and soon enough. But I think that has happened. But of course, with vast movements of people, and especially into the Sun Belt and the metropolitan areas now. We have to be on guard of their rootlessness. It's just not the same challenge, so it's no time for us to retreat. Surely there were homeless then, but I think we have a lot of catch-up to do.
Yes.
In the 80s, because social services were cut at the same time that human need became greater.
Now,
So
at the
we
time
have
that you helped start Extended Care, this after-school latchkey program
Right.
for children, there was a support on the federal level beyond the Austin level.
Well, not at the beginning. It was started by the Urban Council in '69 of Presbyterian churches.
I see.
And then...
Just completely grassroots then.
Right.
Okay.
And I came on board in '71 as executive director when it was still housed in a Presbyterian church. But as we moved into the school district and got their support to use their facilities, when I would do workshops across the state, people were just amazed that our school district would be supportive enough to allow us to use the facilities and give us the kind of support they did. So it was really a cooperative effort in the beginning between the church and the school district, and then became a nonprofit, more secular institution.
So it evolved from being pretty much church-related, grassroots kind of thing. The schools then entered into it, and then it had a broad
community support.
and there were some funds available beyond the
It's had
community.
City and county, United Way, and we did get federal funds and continue to get those through the Department of Human Services.
Okay, now I've focused on that just for a moment, and we could talk a little morality and a little theology here, Peter, as pastors, but I'm assuming, for purposes of our discussion here, that morality has more to do than with such things as smoking and drinking. And Karl Barth once made the observation that Adolf Hitler neither smoked nor drank, and that you could be clean as far as those kinds of personal habits are concerned, and yet just completely party to injustice on a broad scale otherwise. In our own Austin setting, it seems to me that insofar as the religious community wants to address issues of morality, it will be concerned about personal habits and speak to that, and yet not be limited to that. So let's just reflect a little bit theologically on that. Do you feel that as a rector of a downtown cathedral congregation that you're in a position to influence broader public policies that would affect larger numbers of people than just one-on-one kind of counseling or preaching practice? Can you give us a little bit of your thought about what ministry involves in that way?
I think that there's a great role for the churches in bringing about justice in our society. And it wasn't too long ago when Jake Pickle happened to be at one of our masses honoring Tony Berger, who recovering from a terrible car accident. And I had a chance at that mass to reflect on the social justice issues that this community faces. And I happen to think that Representative Pickle was in the forefront in some of those issues, and I think that when the church can speak openly and honestly about what's important for our society, for our community, that everybody can be well served. And I think that takes some leadership among the church community. And I feel that the downtown pastors that I have met really, like yourself, are stepping forward and are concerned about that. I can give one particular issue that I think is really significant. Dr. Browning Ware of First Baptist Church in downtown Austin came out publicly, and I praised him for it at the time, back when the busing issues were very hot in Austin. And Dr. Ware was saying, let's not abandon our children, our schools, he took a very positive and strong stand, which favored building up each school. And so we tried to work as a religious community to support what was an integration policy, and which I think ultimately served well in the schools. I know in our particular school of St. Ignatius, in 1980, we said there would be no new students admitted the year that busing began, because we did not want the churches to be a place where people could flee to get away from the social issues of the church, of the society. And so it cost us a lot of dollars at the time, but I think ultimately it helped Austin to have an integrated school system, and ultimately we now look to the challenge of the future, which would be you know, spreading the wealth among all the schools and among all the school districts of Texas, to raise that educational level and to fight against what I consider one of our major problems, which is the dropout rate. I was reading a statistic not too long ago, just to carry that through, that Austin is a city where there are 1/3 of its adults have had at least college education, and yet we have a terrible dropout rate. So that we have the top 1/3 getting a lot of schooling, and the bottom 1/3 economically getting very little schooling. And I think that can be looked upon as a scandal in a university town where education is highly valued, or so we think.
And it makes you wonder, too, whether the fact that we do have such a high proportion of people with that educational level, if somehow that couldn't be brought into play to help meet the need of the vast numbers who are under that level, and whether the churches might be instrumental in helping network people with the skills, the commitments, with those who are experiencing that need. And I suspect that networking was a process, Rose, that you brought into play as extended care was coming into being and continues to operate.
Oh, yes, indeed. But I think the churches are the most viable network in the community, and the religious communities. And my concern is the retreat of people from the metropolitan central city. Cities are where all the trends are set. They're just where ideas come out. And I think if it's attitude, I think morale comes from attitude. And I think the churches are the key to getting all the populace involved in concern for all this human power in this one place and time. And that might be philosophical, but I think it's there has been a change in the past decade in cities that have grown so much like this, and we're having a hard time keeping up with. We have catch-up to do to get a hold of what the problems are, really. The churches can identify the issues.
And part of the problem, not just in Austin, but elsewhere, people spreading out to the outskirts, to the suburbs.
And really, isolation goes on in so many places.
And leaving an emptiness in the middle.
That I call the hole in the donut.
Okay. Now, I have a theory about Austin I'd like to bounce off the two of you here. And it seems to me that Austin has a good shot at being a viable metropolitan area, because it's not so large, but that you can't get from one end of it to the other within a half an hour if you're not going at rush hour, sort of thing. That you can get to the center of the city from almost any point around about, and have an expectation that it can have a viable core. And now, you live downtown. I serve downtown, but live just sort of on the edge by the university. So I'm not as much in the center of things as you are here 24 hours a day, Peter. But you hear it's kind of quiet downtown sometimes?
Sometimes when everyone goes home, it's very quiet. except on 6th Street, which is okay too. I sometimes feel that people that say bad things about 6th Street really haven't been there, because I think it's certainly as far as a college town, you know, it's quite a lively street for college students and other young people around Austin. But apart from 6th Street, I find that sometimes the streets are terribly deserted.
Yes.
And I guess that I would like to see more of the central city being, you know, coming alive. You yourself have done some wonderful things at your church. I've heard about them, and I see them now in action at the noon programs that you have at Central Presbyterian Church. And I think that kind of reawakening of activity in downtown Austin can really be helpful.
Yes, I think this is one of the reasons, long before my coming, and the people of that congregation committed themselves not to move out to one of the suburban areas, but to stay in the central district in order to continue to bear witness to the fact that every city needs a viable core, and that as that happens, so does all of the surrounding area flourish. And as that suffers, then so does the whole suffer. And I suspect that the one thing that I'm optimistic about is that there is in Austin, between the Capitol, between the university, between the ecology of the downtown area, the ambiance that really is here, that there's something to build on, that some metropolitan areas really are dead without any hope of recovery, without a central focal point. And so I'm without wanting to sound like just a promoter of the place, I can envision by the turn of the century, as community forces learn to work together and cooperate together, which the religious community is a component, that you can have a model of what a city can be, and a kind of caring that arises out of a caring. Now, I don't want to sound Pollyanna about this, because I know, for instance, when the school bond issue was defeated, that had a depressing effect on the community. And Rose, having been around for a while, is that true, that that's the first time that
That's correct.
the voters have turned that down?
We've ever defeated a bond issue of the school district, right.
And I think that, what's your interpretation of what that, how we can go past that?
I think economic times have something to do with it, that there's still a lot of demand on our government services and less money to pay for them, so people are very tax conscious. I think that is the major issue. But they're going to try again, I'm sure, and there'll probably be more team building for support of it. Maybe once you never had been defeated, you think you never will be, and
right.
perhaps there was not enough preparation for it.
No longer the illusion that you're invincible.
Right, but it is an awakening that you know, that support is just not naturally there. You have to work on it.
And I think that maybe in a broader sense, you can't take for granted Austin's progressive spirit, that where you have seen times in the past that it's been out front on things. If people are running scared, they're not apt to even make those ventures of faith.
And there are more anti-tax, anti-government vocal groups than there were in the past. I think Austin has always encouraged citizen participation, and we have a lot of it. And neighborhood groups, that's been encouraged, and when you have that, you have a lot of good debates going on. I think that's very healthy. And I think this city is very open about that. And this time, the people that were against further taxation and bonding, voices were heard.
But that, if you can somehow let that free debate take place and yet not have it be divisive to the point that it is injuring all parties. And I think as a community builder, before our time concludes here, Peter, give us a little bit of a sense of how the churches can be a community builder in regard both to the morale and the moral. You've mentioned one very concrete example with St. Ignatius, that you're saying, in effect, the parochial system is not to be at the expense of the public school system. That's community building.
Correct.
Now we're in the 1980s, going into the 1990s. Anything come to mind that you could offer our viewers at this point?
Well, one of the great signs of hope, I think, is the community organizing that's done among the churches. The Austin Interfaith Sponsoring Committee, for example, is, I think, a power to be reckoned with, and certainly I think some of the politicians sit up and listen when this group of 30 or so churches speak on any particular issue.
Well, I think we're going to be sitting up and listening to some of the insights that you've offered us today, because these give us, both within the religious community and the larger community, a perspective that we'd like to thank you, Father Peter Logsdon and Rose Lancaster, for being part of our discussion today. Join us again next week on Austin Faith Dialogue as the series continues at the same time. I'm Richard Thompson, on behalf of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries, thanking you for watching, and peace be with you.